I was working a night shift and I was back at the nurse's station, and I took my phone out and saw that I had a missed call, and it was 1:09. So I called back and said, oh, sorry, I've missed a call, is everything okay?
On the line is a friend of Lisa's daughter.
And she said, no, we can't find Libby. I said to her, what do you mean you can't find Libby? It was like the whole of my left-hand side had gone numb, and I kept trying to tell myself everything would be okay.
21-year-old Libby is studying philosophy in Hull. Her parents try calling her.
She didn't have a phone. She'd left it at home, which was not unusual for her, because she would say to me, well, I'm out with my friends, why do I need my phone?
Libby's friends call the police.
Libby had gone out for the evening on the Thursday, gone to some friends, had a bit of a house party before then moving on to the Welly Club, which was a normal Thursday night out for the students of Hull. Libby had had a bit too much to drink and she'd been refused entry into the Welly Club, which then left her friends in a situation of, well, we'll put her into a taxi, pay for the taxi, make sure she got home.
A few hours later, the friends were kind of texting Libby to check that she'd got home okay. They became concerned when Libby wasn't replying. With any missing person, you kind of look at and think what could happen. Because she's young, she's a student, has she gone off with friends? You know, actually just wants some time out. Is she safe and well and actually missing voluntarily? When we found out, obviously, Libby left her phone at home, that was one line of inquiry that, in essence, was kind of blocked from the start.
12 hours later, Libby is still missing.
I knew Libby was going to a lecture at 2 o'clock, and it was a really important lecture for her to go to. I said to Russell, if she's not in that lecture, we're going to have to go up there. About 2:10, the phone rang and they said no, she's not turned up for her lecture.
Libby's mum and Dad Russell rushed to Hull.
It was the most horrendous journey. I hadn't slept, obviously. It was all really overwhelming. And as we drove past the Humber, I said to Russell, she's in that water. And he said to me, oh, don't be silly. And I said, no, I'm not being silly, she's in that water. I knew I shouldn't feel that way. And you very much jump between absolute despair to hope.
By the Tuesday, it was starting to gather a lot of momentum and was getting inquiries from a lot of national media outlets.
We rely heavily on the media in initial stages of investigation because it draws witnesses out. Proof of life is always what we try and find, so the last known time somebody is alive.
The taxi driver came forward to say, yes, he was the one that took Libby home and kind of gave us his account. He said that he dropped her off right outside the door and he drove off. So you then set the parameters around that home address.
It's virtually impossible not to be caught on CCTV cameras somewhere. Was she with anybody? What, was somebody following her?
Became aware of some footage along Beverley Road of a female, and because of the timings and the last location we had, that was more than likely to be her.
As you watch the footage, you can see that she's wobbly, staggering around a little bit. And then as it unfolds, that to us became more and more confirmed that was Libby in the footage.
She was really upset about not being let in the club and being sent home. In the mood she was in, I know that's why she went for a walk that night and didn't go into her house.
A CSI attends Libby's home.
When someone goes missing, the CSIs would attend her student accommodation and fingerprint items that we know that she's handled. From a forensic perspective, it's important for us to get samples from her in order that if the worst case scenario is she's found dead and she's decomposed, then we're able to identify her through fingerprints and DNA.
Libby's keys are recovered on the street outside her address.
Something had gone hideously wrong. The Libby that I knew and loved would never have left me or her dad or her siblings or her boyfriend. in a place where they didn't know where she was. She would have got a message to us if she could have done. Yeah, your brain goes to very dark places.
It's really difficult for a CSI that gets called out to an incident like this to try and determine how serious the case is. You know, is this going to turn into a murder scene?
Libby is our kind, thoughtful, beautiful girl. As you can appreciate, this is a very difficult time for us both.
It was a constant dialogue in my head, but actually what it really was I knew that she wasn't coming home.
Please come forward with any information you may have, no matter how small or irrelevant it may be. We just want Libby home.
"21-year-old university student Libby Squire hasn't been seen since going on a night out with her friends in Hull."
It was really important early on that we got into the family to find out everything we could about Libby herself.
I'd always wanted to be a mum, and Libby made me a mum. On the day she was born, I picked her up and laid her on my chest, and that's where she stayed for the best part of 7 years. And yeah, we were really connected, really connected. Yeah, it was all my dreams come true in one little person. It was amazing, truly amazing. She was funny, caring, kind, a really genuine person, an amazing big sister, an amazing friend, amazing daughter. Just, you know, a really all-round good person, I think. Her mental health started to decline when she was probably at the beginning of year 8. There was lots of different issues that had gone on at school. It was something I wish she hadn't have gone through, but it made us closer. All of these things were part of Libby's complex character. They didn't define her, but they were part of her.
Police ask if this is why Libby could have gone missing.
I hoped that. I hoped that she'd had a mental health breakdown, but I knew that wasn't the case. She worked for more than a year, and really was coming out the other side and was doing so well. I was really excited for her when she wanted to go to university. I was really proud of her. She said to me, "Mum, I'd forgotten how much I love learning." And that just filled me with joy. She really found herself. She found the person that she wanted to be. Internally, I had this really loud voice saying, "She's dead, she's dead." And I couldn't feel her.
This is the road where she was last seen very late last Thursday night. At 12:09 on Friday morning, she disappeared. A week on, the fact remains Libby is still missing. Police say it is their top priority to find her.
We decided to release images of Libby's clothing to the media. We made contact with those manufacturers. If we can say exactly what she was wearing, that might just trigger a memory for somebody.
Several witnesses come forward, saying they saw or spoke to Libby, who appeared distressed but refused help. Just before midnight, the trail goes cold.
The search was huge for Libby, certainly one of the largest I've ever known. The amount of officers involved was enormous. It was obvious from the start it was going to be a long, drawn-out search to cover all the area that was needed to be covered.
They'll use licensed search officers to search areas where the victim was last seen, where she was travelling to. A CSI could be attached to a licensed search team. If they find anything, it will obviously need photographing in situ and recovering. It's a very structured search, and if it's there to be found, they will find it.
As the search continues, CCTV experts spot Libby further up Beverley Road.
From footage, we kind of see a man. As we can see Libby walking, he's mirroring her on the opposite side of the road. That starts to give us a lot of concern. We see the male approaching Libby, they engage in sort of conversation, and we need to know who that gentleman is.
Libby and the man turn down a side street. They're captured again outside a business premises.
What it did show was a vehicle pull up. A male was sat with his legs outside with the car door open. After a short period of time, he then disappeared again. And then a second figure that we believed could have been Libby. You then saw that figure get into the vehicle, followed by the male into the driver's seat, and then the vehicle move off. We thought it possibly was Libby, but it was really important to show Lisa and Russ that, to get their views as well. They obviously know Libby better than anybody.
As soon as I saw it, I knew it was her, from the way that you could see she put her hand up to touch her hair, and that's what she did. That was, good, because there was a development, but scary.
It was pure chance, really, of being able to get that. Certainly if it had parked further up the street, we would have not been aware of him there or his vehicle there.
Police recover a watch from near to where the car was parked.
That had actually been found by a lady and handed into the police station. And when we looked at that watch, we were able to show that to Lisa and Russell, and Lisa was able to say that that was Libby's watch, and she would have probably been wearing that at the time.
The team continues to track the car.
Through another CCTV trawl, we capture the vehicle kind of coming back onto Beverley Road and then down towards Oak Road.
CCTV officers were then able to follow the vehicle going onto Oak Road Plainfield. That vehicle appeared to stay there for a period of about 8 minutes before it had then left the area. So that left us with the question of, well, where is Libby? CCTV officers then had the job of trying to track that vehicle.
There are no further CCTV sightings of Libby.
Obviously the person in the vehicle was the last person who'd have seen Libby. It's really vital that we identify who this person is.
The playing field is secured and a fingertip search begins.
Searching a huge parkland area is a logistical nightmare, and as a crime team manager, you have no concept as to what may or may not be important. Had Libby dropped anything? Had the offender dropped anything? Were there any good footprints? Anything that might lead to their identification as to where has Libby gone?
Oak Road playing fields is a substantial area. The back of Oak Road playing field is the start of the River Hull. One of our considerations was, has Libby accidentally fallen into the river, or has Libby gone into the river by another means, and then how would we recover Libby from the water?
Police go door to door.
One key witness reported being woken up by the sound of a female screaming. They looked out of the window and they saw a dark figure running back along towards where the car park is.
The man tells police he looked at his watch and it was 14 minutes past midnight.
If Libby was in that car at the time, is that Libby that is screaming?
That's taking the investigation into another direction, that something has happened to Libby. She has been the victim of a violent act.
The team continues to track the vehicle.
After the vehicle had left Oak Road Plainfield, it had then returned into the Newland Avenue area of Hull, just driving around. He'd been doing that for the hours leading up to Libby's disappearance as well. He'd spent practically all evening and all of the early hours just driving aimlessly up and down and around and around.
The footage is either too dark or grainy to get a good look at the number plate. Just over 3 hours after being seen with Libby, the man is captured stalking another woman.
The male in the vehicle is seen to get out, is on foot, is masturbating in the street. So that is creating alarm bells as to his behaviour.
Since Libby's disappearance, a number of women have come forward with similar concerning reports.
What's the emergency? My housemate lives on the bottom floor. Her light was on and she turned it off to get into bed, and she's caught a man looking in.
We did get a lot of calls from members of the public in the area that had been victims of voyeurism type crimes. People had been followed, or they'd seen somebody in the street exposing themselves. With Libby disappearing, that seemed to make people want to report that more in case it was possibly linked.
Police, what's your emergency? I think there's a few pins from outside my house.
Some of them were sexual offences, voyeurism and outraging public decency. Other of them were burglaries, stealing underwear, sex toys.
When we think of burglary, we think of it in terms of a financial crime. However, in the criminal histories of sex offenders, the burglary actually serves a different motivation. It's to take away very specific objects for their own personal gratification.
The team need to determine if the offences are linked to Libby's disappearance.
We was keeping an open mind. There were some similarities. It was all in and around that student area, but because the descriptions were of a similar, quite generic male, white, dark hair, mid-20s, that it was too generic to say it was the same person committing all of the offences. We needed something specific to say that we had kind of somebody who was committing these other offences in that area. We had a report from a lady who stated that on Boxing Day her daughter was walking home into close proximity to where Libby lived with a friend and was being followed by a male. When they got home, that male kind of came into the porchway and then masturbated up the front door. As the Libby investigation was going, the mother reported that to the police. Forensic teams went to the address to examine the door, and then semen was recovered from the door.
Some sexual offenders might use what we call a calling card at the place where they engaged in their sexual offence. He's left a piece of himself there, and I think that would give him an extra thrill, an extra kind of sexual gratification.
DNA swabs and fingerprints are collected from the crime scenes.
The DNA profile was loaded to the DNA database and it didn't match anybody. So from a policing perspective, that's quite frustrating. There was a serial offender who was getting away with this. That would spur the police on even further. They needed to find out who this person was.
Police need to determine if the offender is the man last seen with Libby.
Through the CCTV, we were able to track it to where it eventually parks up.
The male had got out of the vehicle and had walked along Newland Avenue, and he'd walked past a location with some really excellent CCTV, and it was at that point where we'd got a clear image. We were able to identify an address that we believed that male to live at.
His name's Pavel Relevich, and he is a Polish man, moved across with his wife and 2 young children. We need to go to that property and have that person arrested for offence of kidnap, because at the moment we still didn't know if Libby was dead or alive.
Police swoop on Pavel's address.
When the arrest teams get there, you don't know what you're going to find.
In Hull, police raid the address of a man last seen on CCTV with missing student Libby Squire.
The first thing is to check, see if Libby's there. What surprised the arrest teams was it was just a normal family home, toys, normal daily living. There was nothing in relation to Libby in the home address at all.
Pavel Relevich is arrested on suspicion of kidnap and taken into custody.
Nothing out of the ordinary in his appearance at all.
Serious sexual offenders can often appear really, really normal. There's often this kind of traditional idea that sex offenders are these old men in dirty Macs standing around alleyways, but in reality, they walk among us. They keep their sexual deviancy hidden, of course they do.
At the police station, he's booked in.
If you could give me your full name, please. Pavel Relevich. So my next question is very simple. Are you responsible for kidnapping Libby Squire?
Jest pana odpowiedzialny za porwanie Libby Squire?
Nie.
No.
Initially he denied knowing Libby, seeing Libby.
He was softly spoken. almost childlike at times. You know, he would laugh inappropriately at certain moments when he was tense or under pressure. He answered questions politely, and so he wasn't quite what I was expecting.
Police noticed scratches on Relevich.
Tell me about the mark on your face.
Ja noszę okulary cały czas, nie?
I wear glasses all the time, you know?
Okay.
Ja na przykład tak z synem to się zawsze wygłupiam, nie?
And with my son I would always
Zawsze mi okulary tam gdzieś wrzucili czy coś.
foolish games that he would always throw my glasses somewhere.
Nie wiem, czy on mnie tam zarysował, ale poszłem do łazienki, no to już tak miałem. Tu mi krew nie leciała, tylko mi tak czerwone.
Detectives confront him with the CCTV footage.
Explain to me any involvement or knowledge you have about the disappearance of Libby Squire.
Ja mogę powiedzieć wszystko tak, jak było od początku.
I can only tell you how things happened from the beginning.
Then his account changed that yes, he did know her. He picked her up. She was kind of worse for wear. He was being the good Samaritan.
Przyszłem koło tej dziewczyny, nie? A ona mówi do mnie, hey man, stop, please. Że I need help. No i ja się pytałem, no i płakała, cała zapłakana była. I need go home, I need go my mother. Ja mówię, czy no mi się żal zrobiło tej dziewczyny. Ja się pytam, że mówię, że mam samochód, że jeżeli mi poda adres, to mogę ją podwieźć do tego domu. No i ona podeszła do samochodu, weszła do samochodu.
Walked up to the car, she got inside the car.
No i zamknęli jej pasy.
And I fastened seatbelt on her.
Że jej się, no dobrze jej było, nie?
He started saying that Libby was kind of making those sexualised moves towards him, and because he wasn't like that, he kind of ordered her out of the vehicle and left her near the playing fields.
I remember feeling quite sick. It means that she hasn't walked off on her own. It's kind of closed off quite a few avenues of what could have happened.
Relevich's house is searched, and his car is taken to a forensic garage for analysis.
The vehicle was searched for Libby Squire's DNA and fingerprints. There was no evidence to put Libby Squire in that vehicle. Doesn't mean to say that there was no evidence there in the first place. He might have cleaned the vehicle.
Although no traces of Libby, the team makes a disturbing discovery.
In the boot of his vehicle, there was a holdall. Within this holdall were some very strange items. There were sex toy items, there were items of underwear, and also some masks. This obviously indicates that this is a very troubled individual.
Officers also find used condoms and images of women taken without their permission.
A term that we use in order to understand sexual offending is paraphilia, and this refers to an intense focus on either an object or an activity they gain a sexual thrill from. The hoarding of items like this is often quite typical of sexual offenders because it means that they can keep engaging in their objects of lust.
I'm going to show you a scenes of crime photograph of contents of the pink and blue bag. Why are those soiled knickers in your car?
What's funny?
Co jest takiego śmiesznego?
To śmieszne dla mnie takie rzeczy.
To me such things are fun.
Bo jestem normalnym człowiekiem i takich rzeczy nie robię.
Because I am a normal guy and I don't do such things.
At his home, officers continue the search.
They found a PC computer. This would have been taken away for analysis because obviously the police officers want to work out what he's been doing on his PC, who he's been in contact with, what sites he's been looking at, etc. And if there's any evidence on the disappearance of Libby Squire, some items of women's underwear then hidden inside that computer tower. These would have been recovered and then be examined for DNA to see if they can link up to anybody. None of these items link to the disappearance of Libby, but the police clearly think he's very suspicious. Because he was arrested, the police were able to take his DNA and fingerprints. The DNA sample that he provided was loaded onto the DNA database.
We then started getting match results linking to the previous reported non-contact sexual offences.
The first alleged offence, burglary dwelling, which occurred on Friday the 31st of August 2018.
They were able to link several different crime scenes on the DNA evidence.
The next one is voyeurism and exposure. The third one was outraging public decency.
Relovich is charged with 13 non-contact sexual offences.
My early advice to the police and to the Crown Prosecution Service was not to charge him with murder. Whilst we could prove that Relovich was the last person to have seen her, and he was being dishonest about his movements, we couldn't actually prove at that stage reliably that Libby was dead or that she had died by his hand in some way.
The longer the investigation went on, it did become apparent to us that the likelihood was that she had ended up in the water, that she'd gone into the River Hull.
We had an oceanographer on the case, and he basically said, you know, if she's in the river and if she comes back, it'll be sort of 6 to 8 weeks' time.
You know that the chances of finding Libby safe and well are diminishing. In the back of your head, there's always a glimmer that you'll find her.
7 weeks on from Libby going missing, a fisherman calls the authorities.
We were made aware that a body had been found in the river, and that was being forensically recovered. Initially, we didn't know who it was.
And she said, can you talk? I said, yeah. She said, we think we found Libby's body. I felt numb.
The most important thing is to discover who that person is. So the police would look at kind of primary and secondary identification markers. Clothing would be an identification marker. Any possessions on them. Main markers would be dental records and also fingerprint identification.
The chances of it being Libby were quite high. The reason for that was because Libby had been bought a necklace on her 21st birthday, which was a gold necklace with a gold L pendant, and that was still seen on the body.
The woman's clothes also match what Libby was last seen wearing. The body is transported to the mortuary.
The police were able to recover fingerprint detail from the body's hands, and they were able to identify that this was the missing person, Libby Squire.
I felt like everything had ended. It was horrendous. Didn't fall in a heap on the floor, but I do remember sort of just sinking into the chair and just feeling nothing. My worst fears had been realised.
When we got confirmation it was Libby, I've never seen the inquiry room change so much. There was a lot of sadness, also a lot of kind of relief in one way that we found her. We can get her home to her mum and dad. From looking at the tide times, if we hadn't have recovered Libby then, we would never have recovered her, because the next day she'd have gone out into the North Sea.
Lisa insists on seeing her daughter.
I was desperate to see her. It was a week after she'd been recovered. And yes, she didn't look like Libby used to look, but she was still my little girl, and it was about being with her and thanking her for coming back and for telling her she looked beautiful, because to me she looked absolutely gorgeous. And just sort of saying to her, you're back home now, you're safe, and no one can hurt you anymore. And you know how, whilst I've got breath in my body, I'll fight for her, and you know, and yeah, and being, and just being in the same space as her.
Now a murder investigation. Police still need to determine how Libby died.
At the post-mortem stage, it was impossible for the pathologist to ascertain the cause of death, mainly due to the decomposition. Marks on the body could have been caused by the turbulence of the water.
One of the main lines of inquiry was Libby dead or alive when she went into the water? Because her body had been in the water for 7 weeks. Obviously, her body, the lungs wouldn't give us that information.
The team needs evidence to support their theory that Libby entered the water at Oak Road playing fields after Relovich drove her there. They call in forensic ecologist Rosie Everett, a specialist in microfossils.
My involvement with the case was about trying to ascertain whereabouts she had been put in and how long she'd been in the water for. If you look at it under the microscope, you'll see lots of tiny little shapes, circles, triangles, and those are diatoms. Diatoms are microscopic, single-celled algae. They grow in big colonies, and they grow in different water conditions. So a freshwater river will have different diatoms to a more salty estuarine system.
The police were hoping that the diatom evidence would be able to prove that Libby's body had been dumped further upstream, and then the sheer weight of the water and the currents had pulled her further downstream into the estuary.
And what that means is we have to go out and take either soil or water samples from across different locations where we think Libby came in contact with that water.
As well as working out where Libby died, the team need further evidence that proves Vrelovich is her killer. Internal swabs are sent for forensic examination.
Normally, anybody who's been the victim of a sexual crime, we have a 7-day forensic window just because the body will degrade those cells. I don't think anybody was expecting to be a positive forensic result coming back after a body being in the river for 7 weeks.
6 months on from his arrest, Vrelovich pleads guilty to 13 non-contact sexual offences. He's sentenced to just under 6 years.
Often these are dismissed as trivial sorts of offences, but actually you could see in the victims of his offences that the effect on them was far from trivial. All of the offences took place in and around the student area of Hull, and that was very significant because it was the same area in which Vrelovich had come into contact with Libby Squire. It was not a one-off incident. This was regular, persistent conduct. You could see in the conduct that he was getting bolder.
It was good to know that he was held in custody on other things, which meant he couldn't go out, he couldn't abscond, he couldn't go back to his home country, and he couldn't do it to anybody else.
With Vrelovich behind bars, the team focuses on potential evidence recovered from Libby's remains.
This is one of the first cases that looked at clothing fibres for diatom analysis. And what we found, the fibres had absorbed pretty much every diatom ecology in the entire River Hull, Humber Estuary, North Sea system. Now, even though we couldn't give a direct location, it did narrow it down to her last sighting. So we know that it was definitely around the River Hull that she was put in, which in turn supports other type of evidence such as the last known sighting on CCTV.
The evidence is consistent with the police's theory that Libby entered the water at the playing fields.
Having scientific evidence is absolutely crucial. In terms of Libby's body revealing how she'd been killed, we didn't get an enormous amount of help. We all thought that we needed to have some sort of breakthrough, evidentially.
Everybody had been told we're going to have a briefing, so people were thinking there's something happened, there's clearly some information to be shared.
After recovering the remains of 21-year-old Libby Squire from the Humber Estuary, detectives leading the case have a development.
Everybody had been told we're going to have a briefing. We're told that the DNA recovered from swabs taken from Libby had identified Pavel Vrelovich's semen.
After 7 weeks in the water, it was significant, and to be honest, I've never heard of that before that length of time, and it took all of us completely by surprise.
That was a crucial moment in this case. It was a moment at which we knew that he was lying about his contact with Libby, because Vrelovich claimed that he had had no sexual contact with Libby Squire at all, that he had left her alive and well, nothing had occurred between them. And yet there we had his DNA, his semen, and that blew his account to pieces.
We knew that it was a rape charge, if nothing else. And it felt good. It felt good that actually she hadn't died in vain. You know, that she was going to get some justice.
You are under arrest for the murder and rape of Libby Squire in Hull on Friday the 1st of February 2019.
Muszę pana poinformować, że zostaje pan oskarżony w tej chwili za zabójstwo i zgwałcenie Libby Squire dnia 1 lutego 2019 roku w Hull. It's impossible.
To jest ja nic nie zrobiłem, to jest 100%.
What I mean is I haven't done anything. This is 100% sure. I would have never killed a human being.
The fact that the offender laughed, I don't think it's actually necessarily a sign of somebody not taking it seriously. I would interpret that as a sign of stress, and actually quite extreme stress, perhaps because he's realised the amount of evidence that's piling up against him.
Despite the DNA evidence, Relevich continues to protest his innocence.
When they went back into interview with Pavel, he did confirm that they had sex and instigated by Libby, and it was consensual.
It was very, very unlikely that Libby, in the condition she was in, the type of person she was morally, would have had consensual sex with Pavel Relevich on a crowd playing field.
The fact that we've got a member of the public hearing screams coming from that location, none of that was supportive that this was a consensual sexual act.
After he had left Libby at the playing fields, he was seen masturbating in the street. That was significant. What it demonstrated was that this was a man who had an insatiable sexual appetite.
Relevich is charged with rape and murder. As the team prepares for trial, Libby is laid to rest.
She grew up and spent lots of time on the hill at West Wickham, and the church is on top of the hill. So it was a really obvious choice, really. There was about 400 people in the church. It's a really tiny little church. And it was just so lovely to see all those people that had come out to say goodbye to her. She'll never die in all of those people's minds, you know, she's always there.
Relevich, flanked by lots of prison officers, it looked small and insignificant in the dock. He was a very quiet, softly spoken man, and you know, if you didn't know what he'd done, you might be persuaded that he couldn't have done this.
Often it can be really surprising to find that it's a very regular person next door who's engaging in these kinds of acts. What we know from the profiles of people who commit extreme sexual offences is that very rarely are they in the grip of something that they can't control.
Relevich insists Libby consented, and his defence argues he wouldn't have had time to kill and put her body in the river.
The CCTV compilation was absolutely crucial, and the police did a fantastic job in tracking down every last scrap of CCTV footage. And we were so fortunate that the CCTV included footage from a neighbour's house that just caught the narrowest beam of light from his car headlights. He went back to the playing fields. We could prove when he got there and when he left. And that was, in my view, a particularly devastating piece of evidence. We will never know, but it certainly extended the window of his opportunity to do all those things.
The jury retires to consider their verdict.
They were out for about a week, a very long retirement. This was not a foregone conclusion that there would be a conviction, so I think everybody felt a massive pressure in the case. And then ultimately comes that moment where you're told they've reached a verdict.
Relevich is found guilty of Libby's rape and murder.
Relevich was sentenced to life imprisonment and ordered to serve a minimum of 27 years.
There was a definite sigh of relief from everybody within the courtroom. There was a lot of immersion.
It's kind of that bittersweet, because obviously Libby's lost her life, I feel proud that Pavel has been rightly convicted. He can't hurt anybody again.
She had come back and she had given the evidence that nobody ever expected her to give, and she got him behind bars.
In Libby's memory, Lisa is campaigning for more people to report non-contact sexual crimes to the police.
Out of a group of sort of 20 of my friends, each and every one of us has been a victim of a non-contact sexual offence at some point. Things need to change. This has been going on for far too long. I work quite closely with the Met and Thames Valley Police. I go into schools now, schools, colleges, sixth forms, and talk to them about the importance of reporting any non-contact sexual offence.
Non-contact sexual crimes, such as voyeurism or exposure, were often taken as trivial, but actually what recent research tells us is that they often form a really important stepping stone in somebody's sexual criminal career. The fact that the offender went back out looking for another victim only a few hours after he'd killed Libby shows that his sexual offending was increasing, not only in terms of severity, but also in terms of frequency.
If the police don't know anything about it, they can't do anything about it. Reporting these non-contact sexual crimes to the police could prevent someone being attacked by a predator.
She is a really, really strong woman who has been through a lot, but she's been able to take the strength from that and to try and prevent anybody else going through what Lisa and her family has.
The overwhelming feeling that we got was that everybody was so sorry that had happened in their home city. Because Libby loved Hull. It's a really friendly, really lovely city. Because of her, the streets of Hull were safer. Yeah, I think she'll be remembered up there for a very long time. And there was a real feeling of love. I miss her. She was my funny, caring little pie.